is going to be a review of Loki Season 2, the entirety of Season 2, in mostly spoiler-free fashion. So if you haven't seen the show yet, you can watch and I won't be spoiling, getting into any sort of deep story spoilers. At the time this video is getting published, this video or the finale would have already been out for roughly over a week. This video would have been done sooner, but there was another MCU new release that I had to do a review for last week.
I can't. Can you? I got it.
Now, Season 1 of Loki was the biggest success for these Marvel shows in terms of viewership, beating out the likes of big hits like WandaVision or Moon Knight. I never got around to doing an official video review for Loki, though I did talk about it in my MCU Disney Plus show ranking video I did last year. Although had I done an official video review, it probably wouldn't have been the most popular video, because I did have some issues with the show in terms of quality. It was a 6-episode season. I thought those first couple episodes were fantastic, mostly when it was centering on those interactions, those excellent interactions between Loki and Owen Wilson's Mobius. Just the writing and everything about it was so sharp and just so well done, and just the weirdness and surrealness of the whole concept of the TVA. But then sprinkled in there were some episodes that I would describe as just meandering around, not really adding a whole lot of relevance. And like I said, quality wise, it's just some of them just didn't really do it for me. And then obviously you get to episode 6, highlighted obviously by our introduction to Kang the Conqueror. So yeah, season 1 was a bit of a mixed bag for me, but there was some stuff in there to where I could see like why the show was the big hit that it was in terms of viewership. Now, season 2 is the continuation of the cliffhanger at the end of season 1. Thanks to Sylvie's decision to, spoiler, kill He Who Remains, Loki, Mobius, and the rest of the TVA are seeking a way to save these ever-expanding, branching universes and timelines from, I guess, collapsing in on themselves, and therefore all the timelines will be destroyed, I guess. It wasn't until the final episode, episode 6, that I was able to piece together what exactly the plot and the goal of what they were trying to do throughout the season was all about. Probably the biggest problem that I had with the show was how tough it was at times to understand what the fuck was going on with the plot and the story. Mainly because there's just so many of these new crazy time concepts that are introduced a lot of the times in the same scene, and it just gets overwhelming. Kai Kwan, who played Short Round in Indiana Jones, here he plays like an engineer, almost sort of like librarian type of the TVA. He knows a whole lot about these crazy time concepts. He's great in the show. He's a really good actor. But basically every scene that he's in here, he's just going through rapid fire explaining these crazy new concepts, like 3 all at once, back to back to back. First, he'll explain a new concept like time slipping, and like, all right, great, got it. Then right after that, he'll explain something like temporal loom, and you're like, what? Okay. And then something about some crazy new machine and how it works. And like, all right, bro, you're just losing me at this point. And this shit goes over and over and over. You know, there's just too much poor story explanations here in terms of how things work, concepts, just introducing too many goddamn concepts all at once. Now, part of the reason why season 1 of Loki tailed off for me the way that it did was because for me, Loki is at his most fun when he's Loki in terms of personality, meaning that narcissistic, overconfidence, just everything about Loki that makes him Loki. You know, you look back at his time in the MCU, and after the first Thor film, when you go back at it, he was pretty boring in that film. From Avengers 1 and onwards, he's been written to be this just ultimate trickster, narcissist, someone you can't really trust. But that's what's fun about Loki, is all of those personality traits. Even in Thor Ragnarok, when he was obviously making that transition to becoming a hero and a true ally to Thor, he still had those personality traits that made him Loki. In season 1 of Loki, he still feels like Loki for those first 4-ish kind of episodes, but after that he becomes basically the straight man of the series, and that carries into season 2. It's good character growth, and it's sort of natural in terms of how things progress with him, how we see him in this show. It just sucks that you lose that fun character that we had before. All of the agents of the TVA, Mobius included, here in season 2, act and feel very different from how we saw them in most of season 1. That's because they're no longer acting under the ruse and the lies of the timekeeper and just the basic lie that the TVA was built upon. Still love Owen Wilson as Mobius. He still has a lot of great moments. Not quite as comedic as he was in season 1, but he's still really good here, and he has a whole lot of moments where he really does bring the heart of the show in several scenes, especially as the show gets towards its conclusion, towards the end. The character that I still just didn't have much use for here again is Sylvie. My main problem with Sylvie is that no one can ever talk to her or try to reason with her about anything without her being super defiant and going into stabby, fuck off kind of mode. This goes back to the end of season 1 with her ending scene with He Who Remains. Now, after He Who Remains, or Kang, lays out basically everything that will happen should they kill him, then she goes into stabby, kill you, I'm gonna get you kind of mode. And Loki trying to reason with her by saying, look, clearly this ain't your average black dude here. He clearly knows what he's talking about. Let's just think this through before we make a decision that's gonna ruin all timelines, start a multiversal war, all of that kind of shit. But nope, no one can ever talk to her, and then she just goes into fuck you, stabbing kind of mode. Unfortunately, season 2 makes you relive this lack of understanding and reasoning on her part. Made me dislike the character even more here. Here in season 2, she still has more moments in that where it doesn't quite result into the whole stabby, kill you kind of mode. But again, it's like, damn girl, no one can ever reason with you at all. That and some of the most shameless product placement in some of the scenes that she's in is just like, wow. McDonald's, they definitely paid good money for their sponsorship in this show. I'll put it that way. For those interested in what could be story progression for the MCU at large, there's the continued inclusion of Kang the Conqueror. Season 2 doesn't really pay off the whole thing of sort of what season 1 sort of tease in terms of multiple Kangs coming, variants of He Who Remains, but we do get the inclusion of another variant of him, Victor Timely. He's sort of a version of Kang, I guess one of the earlier versions from the 1800s. Now here it's a good performance from Jonathan Majors. It's cool to see the differences in this Kang and just the performance in general from what we saw from Kang in Loki season 1 and in Quantumania. In terms of story progression for the MCU, though, it's just tough to see at this point where this whole Kang storyline is really going and what there is to really look forward to. So that's what you get with Kang in season 2. Definitely my favorite character, though, here is Miss Minutes, the little techno hologram clock with the southern twang accent. That twang in her voice, I don't know whose idea it was to give her that southern twang, but goddamn, I love it. It sounds hot as hell. Miss Minutes really wasn't in season 1 all that much. She had a few scenes towards the beginning where she was just basically explaining how the TV worked, a la that talking DNA cartoon in Jurassic Park. But her total screen time for season 1 couldn't have been more than 5 minutes. Her most memorable scene besides her introduction to the TVA was definitely that jump scare that came out of nowhere. Now, she's in season 2 a lot more. At the end of season 1, it kind of showed hints of her becoming sort of villainous in terms of the plot. But in season 2, she just makes a full-on villainous turn. She's just flat out evil in this, including a scene where she's watching a group of people get brutally murdered and she looks happy, excited about it. It's like, god damn, this clock is fucking evil here. Oddly and thankfully, though, she still keeps that fun, playful personality, and that's why I just loved it whenever she was on screen, and the voice, like I said, was just great. It's also amazing to learn about in this show how horny he is. She's a clock who's ready to fuck, I'll put it that way. So besides some decent character stuff here and there, yeah, just a lot of the convoluted plot explanations and just unpleasant feeling of being confused through most of season 2 just wasn't really doing it for me. Like season 1, season 2 was 8 episodes also. And yeah, like I said, most of it was just a whole bunch of stuff to where I'm like, what the hell is going on here? Then we get to episode 6. And episode 6 pays off the whole character arc and growth we've seen from Loki in this show. Now, this will be mild spoilers here, nothing crazy. But when all hope seems lost and these timelines seem like they're gonna die off, I guess, Loki sets off on a mission to set things right, using his new time-slipping ability that he got towards the beginning of the show. It involves trying to replicate a sequence done by the TVA and Victor Timely a few episodes before, but this time Loki keeps going back and forth to set things right after each failed attempt, including becoming an expert in all things time related. When we see the passage of time that took, you're like, holy shit, that's dedication right there. That's unbelievable. Now, in this sequence, the direction and the writing in these scenes to show Loki's understanding of how things would play out each time was absolutely amazing. Great stuff all around. And Tom Hiddleston as Loki, he's just never been better. He was fantastic throughout this entire episode. Now, I talked about how I prefer Loki as a villainous type, and I still do. But wow, does the whole hero angle have a big payoff in this episode? What was also nice in this show or this episode was Loki revisiting certain scenes from season 1, which really did bring things at the end full circle, notably his first interactions with Mobius. And nothing invokes chills in the viewing like a powerful ending, and that's what you get with the ultimate conclusion for this show and Loki himself. The series recap, which you'll get at the beginning of this episode, will remind you of something that he wanted from Avengers 1. And it gets realized here, but in a way that makes sense for where this character is now by the end of this show. Episode 6 was an absolute 10 out of 10. It was just a fantastic episode, among probably the best episodes from any of these MCU shows. It was that good, that powerful. Unfortunately, a majority of season 2 itself, I just wasn't a real big fan of. You know, there was just a lot of episodes, just a lot of the show where it just wasn't, the plot just wasn't quite doing for me. Just a little too convoluted and just not easy to follow. You know, I can harken back to an episode I really liked. That was episode 6. But after that, there just wasn't any episode that stood out to me that was like, ooh, wow, that was really good. Unlike season 1, where I actually can go back to a few episodes that I really did like. Episodes 1 and 2, and I believe 4 I thought were really good. And season 2 here didn't quite have that same feeling. I guess besides episode 6, I did like the episode where they went back to the 1800s to find Victor Timely. That was decent stuff. But because of my lack of enthusiasm for a majority of season 2, I'm going to end up giving it a 6 out of 10.
This is absurd.
While I might not have been that crazy about the whole season itself, the show or the season was worth watching just for episode 6. It was a spectacular episode, among the most memorable things from the MCU post-Endgame. Clearly, this will be the whole end, though, of the whole Loki show. When you see the ending here, it's like, wow, they'd be really forced to do another season or any sort of continuation after this. But given how timelines and multiverses are the current flavor of the MCU, we'll probably be revisiting some of these characters and even these concepts not too long from now. So that'll do it for this review of Loki Season 2. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you for watching.
You'll never be him.
Hi, I'm Miss Minutes, and the